Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Doublers Podcast. I'm Erin Paul, and this week I am recording an interview with the wonderful Beth Lano. Beth is a horn player and an advertising and radio professional who is currently based in Las Vegas and is the Director of Marketing and Communications for the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Hi, Beth. Welcome.
Hi, Erin. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you
I,
doing?
I'm fine. A little correction. I'm Director of Marketing and Public Relations for the UNLV School of Music.
Oh,
So,
yes. That is an important
yes,
detail.
yes. Because if I were Director of Communications for the university, that would be a gigantic pay bump.
Right? Right? You're like, excuse me, I would like some more money. Yes,
Yes.
thank you. Thanks for catching that. Which is even more relevant to your career as a musician to be in that position for the School of Music specifically. So I'm glad we caught that.
Yep.
So just to get started, could you share a little bit about who you are and where you're at right now and sort of what you've been up to lately?
Well, like as you said, I'm Beth Lano, and I'm a horn player in Las Vegas. I've been here for 38 years. I've been here for a really long time, and I was brought to town by Wayne Newton. So I have the quintessential coming to Las Vegas story. Wayne Newton picked me out of an orchestra in Indianapolis, where I was working with my best friend at the time, still best friend, the harpist Kim Glennie, and we came out here all those years ago. I spent about 4 years with him on the road and turned that into a freelance career and a doubler's career as well, because I do a lot of different stuff. Currently, I'm working all of my jobs out of my home in Las Vegas and enjoying it. I'm not doing obviously as much work as a freelance musician, but I've bumped up my work as a teacher. I have about 13 or 14 private students. I also
Wow.
work as a paraprofessional for the Las Vegas Academy for the Arts. And so I work with all the horn students there. We do all of that virtually. Obviously, marketing and public relations for the School of Music at UNLV, which I can do completely remotely. And I'm working as a voice actor. I do a lot of a lot of commercials for a lot of different things, from car dealerships to food banks to just this year, one of my side hustles was contacting the people at the Lincoln Project and um, doing some advertising for the Lincoln Project
Oh,
during
cool.
during the campaign. Actually, got to voice the spot that the first spot that they did that basically introduced Joe Biden at the beginning of the Democratic convention. So
Oh, wow. I didn't know
yeah,
that. That's so
yeah,
cool.
yeah, it was really fun. So I'm doing a lot of things. I'm wearing a lot of hats and enjoying every minute of it.
That is very cool. I did not know that about the Lincoln Project spot. I'm going to have to go look that up.
It's called Biden Dad, and
Biden Dad.
it was released mid-August. So you can find it on the Lincoln Project's YouTube channel.
Cool. Yeah, I've seen a lot of their stuff. It was some really cool stuff. Um, yeah, that's such a cool story. So can you describe a little bit more about that experience of being in Indiana and Indianapolis and what that was like? What were you doing when Wayne Newton picked you up out of the orchestra?
Well, I had just finished up at Indiana University Bloomington and had moved there in January of 1982, and this was August of 1982. Where I lived was basically in Indianapolis, was behind the campus of Butler University, and on the edge of that campus was this outdoor summer theater. I don't know if it still exists, but it was called the Starlight Music Theater.
Mm,
And like many, for us traveling road musicians, we know that there's a circuit. So
right.
like there's also a Starlight in St. Louis, I believe. But it's just one of those places where they would have acts that came in for a week at a time, things like that, or shows. That summer I played Showboat, a national touring company of Showboat, which was great fun. I played Shirley Jones, who was the mom on the Partridge Family.
Oh, wow.
Um, and Wayne was the last week of the Starlight summer season, and he came through town, and from the first or second day, his his book, the way it was set up, was he had sort of a skeleton of a show, and so that show would be in one book next to or on your music stand. Next to your chair was a book about that thick that had about 500 pieces of music, supposedly in alphabetical order, many of which started with horn solos
Oh, God.
and harp solos.
Yeah.
So you had to be really quick. We had, as with many shows like that, you have basically one rehearsal and then opening night.
Right.
So we had a rather long rehearsal that afternoon, and sure enough, they said we'll never play the same show twice, and they certainly didn't. And they kept calling up tunes that had horn solos. So I got some attention there. By the second or third night, the piano player would start playing something, and I knew what the tune was before they had a chance to call it out. So I could either reach down and grab the music, or I could just play it from memory, because I had somewhat of a photographic memory. And so Wayne really liked that. And apparently where they had been touring that summer, they had trouble with horn players and harpists, because there were people, because of the way that is, a lot of people don't really recognize what those tunes are.
Right.
And so the tune is nearly over by the time they get down into that big, thick alphabetical book and pull it out. So I was quick. And I could play the horn. I got the job. And Wayne asked Kim and I, the next to the last night that they were in town, invited us to the hotel where they were staying. And we met in a ballroom at this hotel, and he offered us the job. This is a very condensed version of how that whole night went, because the music director didn't know that we were being hired, and it was it was kind of a strange situation. But 10 days later, we were out here with a few bumps along the way, but we were out here, and stayed on the road with him for 4 or 5 years, and then left after that. So that's how I got here.
Right. That is so cool. What a story. You were fast, you were really good at the alphabet, and you had a photographic memory, and that got you the gig. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny how these things, I mean, the horn playing being a given, of course. It's funny how these small things that, no one in music school would ever be like, well, you better get good at sorting through 500 things of music, because that's going to be the thing that gets you the gig. But it's true.
But it's true, that and flexibility. I mean, you have to be able to adapt to so many different styles of music, which is certainly what that particular book was. There were so many different styles of music that you had to be good at. Those are things that they don't teach you in music school. But that also, in a way, prepared me to be flexible musically, also prepared me to be flexible in my life with, be flexible and be open. And, if you don't know how to do something, learn it as fast as you can, but have that flexibility so you can make yourself as employable as possible.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because that versatility can be so useful.
Yes.
So what brought you, so after you went out on tour, of course, and you're in Vegas, what led you into the field of public relations and marketing?
Public relations and marketing came to me. I was off the road from traveling with Wayne, and I had gotten a job at Bally's Jubilee, the production show that had been here forever. And that show, really quickly about that show was at Bally's, obviously, in Bally's Las Vegas. Right. The band was in the basement and playing into microphones, and the conductor conducted from a TV monitor. And so it was a very bad precedent, because the band was invisible. It was actually kind of cool, though, because if you were a partier, which I was at the time, and you slept up until 45 minutes before the show, and you wanted to show up in what you'd slept in, you could just walk in and nobody would care.
Right.
But anyway, the the hotels, there was a gigantic labor dispute here in 1989, a big labor strike, when the hotels decided they didn't want to have guarantees for musicians. They wanted to they basically, because in this town back then there were like, at my show, I think there were like 18 musicians and a leader, and we were guaranteed work, 52 weeks a year. There
Oh, wow.
were star policy showrooms here, that had 21 guaranteed sidemen salaries plus the leader. And obviously, when these star policy acts, these headliners came through town, they weren't necessarily using 21 people. So it was a little bit of, a little bit of overkill, but that's the way things had always been here. And actually they'd been even more pro musician. So in 1989, what we called the Big Five hotels, Hilton, Bally's, the Flamingo Hilton, which was different, Caesars, there were 5 different ownership groups reflected. Tropicana was one as well.
Mm-hmm.
They decided that they locked out the people at the Tropicana, and then everybody else sort of started to follow suit. So in June of 1989, I would finish my second show at Jubilee, and I'd go out on the picket line at the Tropicana, which was the first hotel to be locked out.
Oh, wow.
I would get off of the picket line and I'd go back to my condo, and I'd sit down with my little word processing typewriter, and I started writing the story. Then I started pitching the story, and I pitched the story to some media outlets. I mean, we were already getting attention in the papers locally, but I started pitching the story nationally, started picking up some publicity for them. I put together a PR packet. I have no idea how I knew how to do this, but I did know how to write.
Right.
I've been a writer since I was a kid, and I walked it in a few weeks later to the desk of the president of the Musicians Union in Las Vegas, Mark Masagli, and I said, I want to be your public relations director. And I was hired.
Wow.
It was not for not very much money, and I was an hourly employee, but that was how I got my feet wet in public relations and crisis management right off the bat.
Wow. Yeah, that's a deep end to jump into, right in the middle of a big labor dispute like that.
Yeah, and to just instinctively know how to call a press conference, how to write a press release, that wasn't a big deal. How to organize and call a press conference, how to handle making statements to the press, how to do reputation management and make sure that your client, in this case the Musicians Union, which I had a vested interest in, which is probably unethical, but right. At the same time, it wasn't unethical,
right,
but it was, but at the same time, being able to handle all this stuff, be on call 24 hours a day. I lived close to the Musicians Union, so reporters would call me at all hours. They'd call me at 3:00 in the morning and say, we need a stand up for you because we want to air it on the Morningside News. So,
oh, wow.
So yeah, you did that. It was a pretty cool thing, and then a couple of months later, my job at Bally's was also, that was also gone. So, so that was, and that sucked because I had been the first full-time woman employee in that band.
Oh, wow.
And I had also learned the book, and I was one of the assistant conductors.
Oh,
so
man.
I was really looking forward to, sort of growing my conducting career out of that, but it was not meant to be.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's amazing. I didn't realize that you were the first woman in the band there. That's
There were
cool.
other women who played in the band, but I was the first one to be hired full time.
Right, the first one who had the chair.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. What a story. The 80s, man.
I know, right?
Right.
Oh my God.
I've heard they were great. No, but
they were too.
Right. But that's a very cool that's a big thing to jump into, is to go straight, and I mean that is a crisis among crises. When you were adjusting to that role and kind of jumping in, did you find that your skills as a performer helped you perform in press conferences and things like that? Did those things translate?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. That's yeah, they helped me, and they helped me in so many ways. And I've always said that that my training as a musician, my education as a musician, my continuing education as a musician helps me in every single thing that I do. I mean, it helps me as a voice talent. As a voice talent, people throw scripts in front of me all the time, and they're like, you interpret these things like it's a piece of music. You're talking phrases. You're not just speaking words.
Yeah.
You read in phrases, and it's like, that's because that's what we're trained to do.
Right. Yeah, because it's the same. I mean, a phrase in music is the same as a comma in a sentence. There's a lot of parallels there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really neat. So you've mentioned a couple times that you are also active as a voice talent. When did that piece of your now tripling come into play?
I knew I wanted to do it when I was still in Indianapolis. Didn't really have time to hone that because I was in Indianapolis for a relatively short period of time after college. So when I came out here, I actually did some voice work during the musician strike, and just sort of started building that from there. And by 4 or 5 years later, just doing little piecemeal things here and there, I was doing a lot of voice work. So I did a lot of radio and TV stuff. Didn't really get into narration or any national stuff until the early 2000s.
Oh, all right.
And I've done all of it without an agent. I just basically hustle myself. Not that I'm not looking for an agent, because I would like to find one, but it's not on my priority list right now. I'm doing fine with it, and I don't want that to be my full-time job.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that field, I mean, having an agent, just like in music, I'm sure means that someone else gets a piece of whatever it is that you do.
Yeah.
But that's, how did you find your way in without the benefit of an agent at that point?
I took some of these little pieces of, these short, little seemingly unimportant spots that I did. Mm-hmm. I put them together with the help of a friend of mine who owned a recording studio, and I had done some work for him. Put it on a cassette tape, made a bunch of copies, and I walked it around to every ad agency in town and waited until they listened to it. It was like, I'm not just dropping this off. I'd like to meet with, and I had the names, which is no small feat back then, because this is before computer. There were computers, obviously. I'm not that old, but this was before everybody had computers, and we weren't Googling.
Pre-LinkedIn.
Looking through phone books, and I knew some of these people peripherally from being a PR person. I mean, and I had some of my media friends who said, "Hey, this is somebody in an ad agency that I've worked with before." Yeah. So I picked it up, and there are a couple of people that I took my tape to that I still work for from time to time. A couple of clients, one in particular. So it was just just pounding the pavement.
Yeah. And to maintain those relationships over such a long period of time, I'm sure also, you've put effort into maintaining that connection and nurturing that relationship to continue for that long. I'm sure is its own, I mean, that's its own thing too, to maintain those connections, especially now, because you can just go, I mean, I'm sure I have never done any voice work in a serious sense, but I worked at a recording studio where part of my job was finding different talents for different spots. And I just used like a website, Voices 123 or something like that. Yeah. And it was, everything was in the search filter, and you just punch things in. And I'm sure, I don't really remember from the time, but I'm sure a lot of folks may have been cheaper than through maybe other traditional ways. So getting through that shift in technology too, maintaining those relationships and those connections, I'm sure that wasn't easy.
It wasn't, but it was interesting too, because you nurture those relationships, but just as with life in general, it also helps you filter out the relationships that these are people that I really don't want to align myself with. And not that I have like so much work that I'm independently wealthy and can afford to turn stuff down, but
Right.
Like but you do get to the point where you realize what's not working for you. Like, there were a couple of clients that I'd had in the past who for whatever reason, ethically, politically, even, that I could not work with them anymore. And it
Yeah.
wasn't there was no acrimony or anything. It was just like, yeah, I'm just not gonna nurture anymore. And
Right.
those things kind of take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting though. It's pretty interesting how that
Yeah.
worked out.
And I'm sure over time, having your different talents being utilized in so many different arenas, allowing like an ebb and flow in each place, and having that scale of scope, I guess, is probably helpful also for allowing you space to make those choices and say like, okay, I can think about this now for a little while longer, and I can kind of let this
Right.
one go, and yeah, having that variety, I'm
Well,
sure
when
was.
I was a radio personality for many years, and
Mm,
I started out in news radio and then went to basically straight from news radio to morning radio. I was like a wacky morning show host from 1998 to 2007. And so that with that schedule, I mean, talk about ebb and flow. I'd never ever in any of this let my music go,
mm,
because it was like that's who I am. That's what I do. But having to balance that just ridiculous morning radio schedule where you're up at 2:30 or 3,
oh my
and
God.
you're on at 5. But I also had to voice track, record a show that aired on a sister station overnight. So I had to do that every day when I went in. So I'd have to record that before I went on,
Oh
do my
wow.
show, get off the air, go book guests for the coming weeks, write up show prep, and do all of that stuff. Go home, grab something to eat, sleep for 3 hours, get up, do show prep, watch TV, practice a little bit, um, go back to bed for about 3 hours, and then do it again. So that was the 5 day a week schedule. So you
Wow.
end up having to rebalance everything. But there were times when and also juggling the other careers too, because the voice career I was actually in more demand while I was doing morning radio in many ways. I mean, because people were like, oh yeah, we want her because she's Beth from the radio.
Right.
So just finding ways to balance that, and then go play a show or something at night, which is sort of during my bedtime.
Right.
So there were many nights when you just didn't sleep. If
Yeah.
you do a show for a week, you're basically living on three or 4 hours of sleep a night,
Wow. Yeah,
if
because
that.
that time period through 2007, does that overlap Phantom?
Hmm. That was
Yeah.
the beginning of Phantom, and I remember one time not balancing very well and going in because I was subbing on Phantom when it first came to town,
Hmm.
because I was still doing morning radio, and I quit radio when Spamalot came to town, because
Oh.
I was miserable by that time, and it was like uh, they called me and said, hey, Steve Wynn went to the previews. The show was already almost open.
Oh
Steve
wow.
Wynn went to previews, and he said, this is a show about Camelot. Where's my French horn?
Oh wow.
And so the contractor called up and he says, you want to do Spamalot? And I said, oh yeah, I want to do Spamalot. And I wrote up my resignation letter and took it down. But I'd already been subbing in Phantom, and there were a couple of times where I'd go in and sub and my chops felt terrible, and I would just do enough practicing to just maintain.
Hmm.
But there was one period of time when I had subbed at Phantom. Somebody got sick 3 months later. I was going through a really busy time. And I said, yeah, I'll sub, but I'm not going to promise anything because I really haven't been practicing much. And I get in there, and I don't think Sandra Donatel was playing lead at the time. And
Hmm.
she said, you sounded great. And I said, it felt awful.
Right.
And she said, well, how much have you been practicing? And I said, I haven't been. And she says, when was the last time you played? And I said, when was the last time I subbed here? And it had been a couple of months.
Oh wow.
So that's air. Thank God for air.
Right.
Air and pucker, because that
Hmm.
covers a multitude of sins.
Really. I
So
know, right? Yeah.
yeah.
That and thank God for vacation jobs.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot to balance. I mean, that kind of schedule with the morning radio show. I mean, that must have been. You
It was
are a far sturdier person than me.
I there is no way in hell that I could do that now. But it was a great job.
Yeah.
All except for probably about the last year and a half of it was really, really good. I got to see a lot of the world. I got to do a lot of really cool things through
Yeah.
that job. So
That's very cool. Did you travel for that job outside
eh,
of the city?
yeah, they 2 years in a row they sent my partner and I had like four different partners, but
Mm.
I was the constant, but I had four different partners. But my favorite partner, Rick Kelly, they sent Rick and I 2 summers in a row to Boston to the Sam Adams Brewery to broadcast for a week at Sam Adams Brewery.
Oh, wow.
And the only thing that we had to promise to do was drink their beer during our show and talk about it. So I discovered, I don't drink it all anymore, but I discovered I had a fondness for Sam Adams cherry wheat beer, which I found to be quite a suitable breakfast beer.
Ah, yes. And you were just doing your job.
Just doing my
Just
job.
doing your
So
job.
so we went to Boston. They took us to they did these radio sales trips. So they would take their biggest purchasers, the biggest buyers, media time buyers. So our clients would come with us, and then they'd take a couple of the on-air talent in order to basically entertain and sweeten the pot a little bit. So got to go to Cancun and do that, and then
Oh, wow.
one year they did another sales trip like that, and I got to go to Fiji for 10 days.
That is awesome.
Yeah, so
Wow.
it was a pretty cool job.
That's very cool. That is
Yeah,
very cool. Yeah. Wow. That is so I love these stories. It's so cool to hear about this stuff. Because it's such a variety, it's such a variety of things that you've done all within like the scope of marketing, communications, radio, all of these things, but like such a wide variety of experiences and different places that you've gone. That's very cool.
I've been really, really fortunate.
Yeah. It's a very cool career.
Yeah.
Tripling, quadrupling, you know. Uh, um that is awesome. And so it sounds like, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the balance of how there's an ebb and flow between different times in life, and how, when you're doing the radio show, obviously you were not on a heavy practice schedule so
No.
much as a survival schedule. So now, especially now that, everybody's life has probably slowed down a lot more than maybe they would prefer. As you're working from home and doing everything remotely, how do you find that balance compares to, previous balances that you've achieved in these different times in life?
Well, it's so the balance has obviously had to shift because I'm not going out to do playing gigs at night, but
Right.
so I've had to amp up my teaching. So I'm doing all that teaching now, which is great. And so what I do, actually, I feel like I'm busier than I was before everything shut down.
Yeah.
Great, which is great because from a mental health standpoint, it's it's really important not to be sitting around watching TV and doom scrolling, you know, I,
Right.
because it's so easy to do.
Oh, yeah.
But from a balance perspective, it's been really interesting because um, as far as my approach to the horn, I've been, and this dovetails with teaching so well, I've been going back to basics. And
Hmm.
I had injured myself playing a show a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago,
Hmm.
just playing wrong and long. It was Anastasia. I don't know if you've ever played that book.
I haven't, but my partner is also a horn player, and he played Anastasia. And I
It,
heard that it was a very difficult book.
there's so much. There's just so much blowing. There's not enough time to take the horn off your face, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of muted playing, and you feel like you're not really being heard, so you tend to overblow the mute.
Yeah.
So that really hurt. That really hurt my face. And then after that, I got to do. I had 2 weeks off, and then I did 3 weeks of Wicked, and Wicked was where I started to heal. Wicked was great,
Yeah.
but I never really took enough time off the horn to allow my face to heal.
Yeah.
So since the shutdown, it's like, you know what? I'm going to use this as a time to rebuild my chops. So, I'm practicing all kinds of stuff, but I'm spending so much more time on long tones and flexibility exercises and scales and really soft playing and not so much loud playing. And
Right.
a concept that I have that I do with my students that I call horn yoga.
Ooh.
And horn yoga is it's basically, it's just arpeggios, but it's getting the student and therefore my head in the right space where everything's relaxed, and you're forming your embouchure, and you start everything off with 3 deep breaths, and you center. And it's really interesting with this virtual teaching. I absolutely love virtual teaching. I really do.
Yeah.
It's really great because there are things that you can see in a student's embouchure or posture that if you looked at them like that. I teach during normal times. I teach in my living room.
Right.
But if I was looking at my student like this, it would be like that would be really freaking creepy.
Right.
But
Right.
this way I'm catching little subtleties in people's embouchures and in their posture and how they're breathing and all that stuff. And it's like, man, this is great. So I do this horn yoga, and the way we do it is you 1 3 5 3 1 1 3 5, right? So you just keep going up. It's just expanding arpeggios, and we play them back and forth. So this fits right into like the stuff that I'm already doing to practice. This sort of adds to it, and it gives me a chance to focus in on the student, focus in on my own sound production and air and all of that, core engagement and all that stuff. So it's just like I'll teach, and then I go practice, and I go do some stuff for UNLV, and then I'll either go into my master bedroom closet and record a commercial or an audition or something like that, or go to a studio. I mean, it's actually the balance is pretty darn good right now, knock wood. So,
yeah.
It's way better than it was.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the convenience of not having to go anywhere to do any of these things, I'm sure, cuts down on the length of the days. Because I know that that's what I've experienced. Because I have a full-time job in tech, and that job was always remote, and so I was able to take it with me. But even still, I mean, the time that you spend getting somewhere, you can't be on your computer and drive a car at the same time. It's illegal. So there are limits on what you can do. But cutting down on all of that, even though you feel, what I've experienced is that even though I feel busier, I'm doing more things. The fact that I don't have to go anywhere there's kind of a benefit to it, because it's just that transportation piece. I mean, getting around Las Vegas was a little bit easier than getting around New York, but
much easier,
but
easier.
Still.
But still, I bet. I mean, the other day I was getting ready to. What was I doing? Oh, I was getting ready to do a live stream. I do social media for a group in town here that does these live stream broadcasts, and it was 10 minutes before their downbeat, and I was like, oh, it's trash night. I need to. So I mean, it's like I gathered up all the trash in the house and put it out on the curb in the bins and put it out on the curb. And I went in to sit down. I turned on the computer, and I'm going, damn, I was just so super productive.
Right.
If I had to get in my car and go do this, this would be, you're adding on not only the commute, but the doing your hair and your makeup and dressing and all of that stuff. It's like, this is there is a lot to be appreciated about this sort of lifestyle. And I do wonder how this is going to change things once it's safe to go out. I think there are a lot of things that used to require a commute that aren't going to necessarily have to. We have meetings. We have a Friday social meeting with some people in the College of Fine Arts at UNLV that each of us really looks forward to. And we've already been talking about, like, when once it's safe to hang out, are we going to do that, or are we going to continue this online thing? Because we all like the convenience of being able to not only not have to drive someplace, but also the Zoom format is
Yeah.
actually pretty nice, because you can have actual conversations without the room noise and all that stuff. And no, there's no substitute for person to person contact and that electricity of the atmosphere and everything. But what we're thinking of is that we're going to maybe meet once a month, but the other 3 Fridays of the month, we're going to keep doing our Zoom meetings.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to beat in as far as logistics go. And yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of people have, because when I started my job uh, last April, so April 2019, working remotely had become more common over the years, but it was still, I was already in Zoom world. And then all of a sudden in March of this year, everyone joined me and suddenly knew what the heck I was talking about when I was like, oh yeah, well, I just talk to my coworkers on Slack and then we get on Zoom when we need to. And everyone's like, oh, we know what those things are now.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And
that's so wild.
yeah, it's really bizarre. But I think now that, like, the secret's out in a lot of ways where people are looking around and saying, like, and especially with students, I actually used to teach a couple of students virtually, back in 2016, 2017. And I had a somewhat similar experience where I felt like I could be a little bit more, camera resolution was a little bit of an issue at the time, but you can be a little bit more like up in the face and zooming in
Yeah.
on things and checking in on these details. And because there's such an active piece to it where you have to ask the student, can you do this? Can you move the camera here? Can you show me your hand? There's more of
Yep.
almost more of an awareness on their end of having to think about these things. And so yeah, there are some benefits, but I never quite figured out how to do rhythm with the lag. It was tough. I would have them play a metronome so I could tell if it was the internet or them.
That's what I
But
do too.
yeah,
It's like, have them do the metronome, but I also have them do voice memo, record it and send it to me.
oh, that's smart.
That's like, this is your in between assignment, which
Yeah.
creates more work for me, but I don't mind it. It's like, I can, first of all, make sure that you're still practicing, and secondly, make sure you're playing it right. And
Hmm.
I do this with my kids at the academy too. It's like, if they have a recording due, or if they have an audition coming up or something like that, I'm like, just because this isn't teaching hours, these aren't the hours that I'm working for the school district, doesn't mean you can't send me a recording. I'll listen to it, make some notes, and email you back.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so I mean, technology is great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think as, I'm a little jealous of the kids these days because, um, even when I was in high school in the early 2000s and it wasn't so easy to just make a recording of yourself. It
No.
was a lot more of a, you had to buy a cassette tape and put it in the recorder, and if you ran out of tape, it was a whole scene. But now they just have voice memo and it's so easy. So there's a lot of I'm curious to see how that sort of accessibility informs the next generation of musicians and what they are already aware of as they get into higher levels of playing. That maybe that earlier generations, it was just a little bit harder to have that level of self-awareness.
Yeah,
E-
that's a
Even just
very good
recording,
point.
yeah, even just recording a video of yourself playing. I watched myself in the mirror, but it's really hard to analyze in real time. Until I was in grad school, I never took a video of myself playing to actually like look like, oh, okay, is my embouchure working the way that I think it does? That sort of thing. So it's kind of neat that kids
That they're
have that opportunity.
Well, recording is such a great teacher. I was
Yeah.
fortunate I did my undergrad at Ball State, and when I was a sophomore in college, Ball State is in Muncie, Indiana. It's a small town. I mean,
Hmm.
medium-sized town, but within 30 miles of Muncie, there were these two state-of-the-art recording studios, and they were owned by these giants in the gospel music industry.
Oh
So
wow.
and you would get called for a session. It was like 9 to 1 and 2 to 6, a couple times a week. So you could make some decent money. It was non-union, but it was some decent money. And the best part about it was I got to play with my teacher. And I had not played the horn all that long, but he was like, he saw something in me. And he was like, yeah, I want you to come do these recording sessions. I think you'll enjoy yourself and you'll learn a lot.
Yeah.
So we would go in and we would play a track, and I learned that if you mess up, you got to raise your hand and say, that was me, and
right,
everybody has to go back, and so it really helps with your accuracy. But
mm-hmm.
but the best part about this was that, not the very best, because the best part was playing with my teacher, but one of the coolest things was the fact that as soon as you did the track, you could go back into the control room and listen. So this, and listening, even though I couldn't see myself
right
playing, but I could hear things in my playing, and recording is the best teacher. It's just such a great teacher, because you can hear if you're writing that pitch just a little tiny bit high, or if your articulations aren't just right, or if you're not matching style correctly, and you better fix it really fast.
Right.
So yeah, so I mean, I think it will influence students, future generations of musicians, because I think there are going to be, I mean, I make all of my kids record all the time, because, and they all hate it. It's the same concept as when you're a kid and somebody makes you record your voice for the first time. You're like, oh, yuck, I sound like that. Mm-hmm. We have that same thing as musicians, where we're like, oh my gosh, tell me I don't sound like that.
Right.
But you get used to it. And without exception, every single one of my students is like, they're now into it. Now, I heard something the other day when I was recording that Gallet prelude that really bugged me. Why didn't you tell me I did blah, blah, blah?
Oh.
So, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. So
that they're listening with that level of analysis and are like, hey, wait a second, what about this? That's really awesome. Yeah. It's interesting. It'll definitely be interesting to see how that goes. As you're teaching, do you find now, are your students more engaged in some ways because they're having to do these recording projects than maybe they were previously?
I think it's a combination. I think that the recording projects do definitely engage them more and make them more, take a little bit more personal responsibility.
Yeah.
But I think they're also more engaged because I think, like all of us, I think it's a great coping mechanism through this.
Yeah.
They're finding that there's so much right now that's out of our control.
Yeah.
That, here's something that might also be a little bit out of your control, but you can learn to control more and more of it if you just want to put the time into it.
Right.
And what other venture can you so tangibly feel what, the cause and effect? What you put into it is kind of what you get out of it. You can just start to see that progress. And I think these kids are, as you know, teaching as well, it weeds them out. The ones who want to put the time in will put the time in, and the other ones just sort of melt away.
Right.
They quit.
Right.
They quit. But I'm finding my students are really pretty darn engaged, which is good.
That's cool. And to have so many, to have 14, 15, I mean,
they're not all every week. They're I've got like 5 or 6 that are every week, but most of them do like every other week.
Yeah.
Because it's a little bit too much. And so unless they've got something coming up that they need extra help with.
Right. Then you get the panic emails of, I have an audition next week. Can we have 3 lessons between now and then?
Yeah. This tape is due next Thursday. Can we have 3 lessons this week?
Right. You're like, honey, no, it's not going to help.
No, it is not.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess my last question here, I know we've kind of gone off on a few different in a few different directions, but this has been really a great conversation. As far as, so we've talked about how you moved into PR through your music career. And then that has sort of opened doors along the way into these other ventures that you've done in marketing and public relations, communications field. Do you have any advice for musicians who are considering what secondary career field they might want to move into and how they might go about thinking about making that decision?
It's a very good question. I think the best advice I could give anyone is to be flexible, be nimble. If you have something that you're interested in, for me it was obviously, writing and communications and things like that. Find opportunities that to just sort of, just keep your foot in that door and see where they lead. It's as you know too, in the not so distant past, it used to be a stigma. There was a stigma attached to having a day gig, right?
Right.
Or having another thing that you did. There were people, I know, I have friends in LA who were working second and or third careers while they were working in studios and things like that. And they did not want anyone to know that they were doing that stuff. It's not like that anymore. And I think it was like that a lot in New York as well.
Yeah.
But people would look down their nose at you a little bit. I was never like that. I always thought, hey, if there's something else I can do, I'm gonna explore it. Just keep your priorities straight and know that, if music is your life, if I could live without it, I would probably, but right. I can't. So, but respect what you do as far as your craft and your art. But don't close your eyes to other opportunities and things that interest you, and things that are also, it's possible to have more than one passion.
Yeah.
But it's how you treat that, how you acknowledge it, how you respect it, and how you nurture it. So just be flexible, be nimble in everything that you do, and don't spread yourself too thin. But if there's another direction you want to go into, find a way. You because you can.
Yeah. And I think now more than ever, the stigma is melting away because of everything that's gone on. Everybody is having to find a secondary thing to do. If performing was the only thing that you may have been doing, there's just not a lot happening right now. And so, I think that's really great advice, that you can have more than one passion and that you can be interested in more than one thing to pursue. Yeah, that's really good advice. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.